Over 60? Discover the 4 incredible fruits you must eat daily and the 4 surprising ones to avoid. Ruth stood in her sunny Texas kitchen, the air thick with the rich aroma of her famous chili, dancing between memories of laughter and family meals. This cherished recipe was a tapestry of her family's past, threads of love woven into every pot. The very thought of straying from it felt like betrayal. Yet just days ago, a health scare had rocked her world, sending her heart racing as she clutched the results from her doctor tightly, fear clawing at her insides. How could she possibly tell her family that their beloved chili might need to change? She shuddered at the thought of nourishing her body by giving up the foods they held dear, while learning about curious health fads, including 4 exceptional fruits that promised vitality. This new knowledge seemed to mock her cherished traditions. Bananas and mangoes, 2 staples typically found in her kitchen, were placed under the bright lights of scrutiny. Conflicting emotions racked her. Would taking these foods away mean closing the door on family cohesion, on moments spent gathered around the table discussing the vibrant stories that defined them? A medley of thoughts spiraled through her mind. Ruth felt an urgency, a pressing determination to prioritize health lest she become a burden. But just as quickly, guilt crashed in with the weight of her grandfather's creed. He'd always said the kitchen captured true love, that recipes like hers should weave together generations and nurture familial bonds. How could she reconcile her love for them and the very real chance of her health slipping away? As her reflection sharpened in the window, the lines etched on her face echoed a deeper dilemma. Is it selfish to acknowledge health amid the warmth of tradition? The situation twined tighter, a storm brewing within her. Every time she turned to her stove, a battle raged. Nostalgia clashed with modern truths. Would the chili taste the same without the warmth of beloved ingredients? Could she risk disappointing them? She imagined their faces as she served what her heart anxiously churned out. Performs gathered around the table, eyes alive with a mixture of excitement and confusion as she steered their dining experience toward a new horizon. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Ruth felt the weight of her heart in her throat as the dinner hour approached. She began stirring her chili, each swirl amplifying her apprehension. The laughter of her family seemed far away as she questioned whether their collective love for her home-cooked meals trailed behind, lingering in a past she feared losing. Should she reveal her evolving understanding of nutrition? The potential for rejection gripped her, an icy shard that made her muscles tighten. As the family gathered around the table, their joyous chatter wrapped around her, yet felt suffocating at that moment. The warmth of their love was palpable, but it stood on the precipice of a cliff, poised to teeter at the slightest misstep in conversation. What if they couldn't accept this alteration? What if her journey toward a healthier life severed the bonds of loyalty their recipes had represented for generations? An aching chasm filled Ruth's chest as she grasped her spoon tightly, bracing for the moment the anguish of change laid bare before the people she loved most. Would they embrace this new chapter, or would tradition hold its grip, locking her fear in place? Ruth's mind raced as she processed the collective excitement of her family settling around the dinner table. Their chatter was warm and familiar, yet felt like a distant echo as she gripped her spoon, heart pounding under the weight of her internal conflict. Every glance exchanged among her loved ones underscored the fear that gripped her. Would tonight's meal be the last she'd serve as the keeper of their cherished traditions, or could it open the door to a new understanding of love and nourishment? She inhaled deeply, trying to center herself amidst the encroaching chaos of her thoughts. The rich aroma of chili wafted around the table, enveloping her in a momentary calm. Yet as she gazed at the familiar faces, her husband Joe, her daughter Linda, and her grandchildren, anxiety surged anew. This was their ritual. They relished her chili and the stories that came with it. But the possibility of altering that meant risking their affection. Would they even recognize her if she changed the recipe? "Grandma, your chili is the best," her granddaughter Emma piped up, shining with innocent enthusiasm. Ruth felt a twinge of warmth flood her chest, but mixed with the stabbing reality of her health concerns. "Thank you, sweetie. I hope it tastes good tonight," she replied, forcing a smile. The thought of letting her family down nestled heavily in her stomach. Acting on impulse, Ruth served the chili, glancing quickly at the large bowl she had modified. If only she could present a familiar face while masking her intentions to incorporate healthier ingredients. Perhaps their cherished family dynamic could endure this subtle shift. Perhaps. "Before we dive in, I wanted to share something with you all," Ruth began, her voice steadying as she felt the need to be truthful rather than deceptive. She scanned the table, their faces turned toward her, expectations alight in their eyes. "I've been reading about some new fruits that could benefit our health, and I've been inspired to make some adjustments to our meal." Maria's brow furrowed slightly, and she could see Joe's curiosity piqued, while Emma tilted her head, waiting for her to continue. This was not just about the chili. This was about changing perceptions, a leap she hadn't anticipated taking, and yet her heart urged her to forge forward. A longing to unfurl her journey and the apprehension of alienating those she loved swirled violently within her. "I know change can be hard," Ruth pressed on, her pulse quickening, "but I believe our love can adapt. Just like how we grew and embraced new traditions as our family expanded, we can embrace this layer too. It's not about erasing memories, it's about finding ways to create more." Ruth's words hung suspended as her family absorbed her vulnerability. Would they frown at her attempts to intertwine modern nutritional wisdom with old comforts? In that pivotal moment, a shift began within Ruth. The echoes of her grandfather's love mingled with a burgeoning realization. The true essence of their meals was in the togetherness they forged, not strictly the ingredients in their dishes. Yet, as the silence thickened, she couldn't shake the uncertainty that still loomed. Will we be able to talk about how these changes can keep us all healthy? Ruth's voice barely whispered, but carried deep conviction. The table remained silent, and an avalanche of dread welled inside Ruth as she worried that her well-intended honesty would fracture their bonds rather than fortify them. She felt exposed, vulnerable, and unsure about what would come next. Would they accept her risks, or would they recoil from the prospect of change? The answer stirred uncomfortably in her chest, unanswered. A truth lingered in the air like the aroma of the chili she had served, tantalizingly familiar, yet irrevocably altered. And in the quiet that followed, Ruth knew one thing for certain. Change was inevitable, but where it would lead them, into a deeper connection or a painful divide, remained shrouded in uncertainty. As dinner progressed, each spoonful felt like a transaction, a negotiation of love. If she could just gather courage enough to reveal what lay ahead, but would that leap of faith open the door to a new kind of nutrition and tradition, or would it fracture the very foundation upon which her family had been built? The moment of truth lingered just out of reach, leaving Ruth yearning for clarity. Ruth's heart raced as the silence settled over the table, heavy with the weight of her words. Each spoonful of chili seemed to grow denser, as if to reinforce the tension that had taken residence in the air. She fought the urge to retreat. The vulnerability she had shown felt like standing naked in the middle of a storm. but she clung to the thread of determination that continued to weave through her thoughts. She had already taken a step by altering the recipe. One small act, but it felt monumental. If she could navigate this conversation with grace, maybe she could redefine her role not as the keeper of tradition, but as a creator of new memories. The family had changed over the years. Perhaps the meals could transform as well. "It's just chili," she reassured herself, pushing a strand of hair behind her ear. But deep down she recognized it was more than just a simple dish. It was an embodiment of love, of the warmth that had fueled her family throughout generations. Joe finally broke through the stillness, his voice light yet probing. "Ruth, you've always made this chili for us. It's one of those meals that we all look forward to together. I can appreciate wanting to add new things, healthy things, but how will that affect the taste? We all have our favorites for a reason." His question struck at the core of her fears, yet sparked a flicker of clarity. Ruth realized it wasn't about eliminating cherished flavors, but enhancing the experience, making it sustainable for her loved ones. "Perhaps we could try it one meal at a time," she offered, the idea forming in her mind. "Instead of changing everything all at once, we could introduce one new ingredient at a time. That way we can keep the core of what we love intact while also adding in some nutrition." Linda nodded slowly, her brow relaxing as she absorbed Ruth's suggestion. "That doesn't sound so bad. We could even make it a family game, see how many different fruits we can sneak in without losing the original taste." As Ruth listened to Linda, the connection in her heart began to soothe the gnawing uncertainty. Her family was more open to change than she had anticipated. Each comment was a thread in the tapestry of their bond, weaving together old traditions with new ideas. "Exactly," Ruth said, feeling a rush of excitement. "It's about evolving what we have, not replacing it. Like how our family grew when you all had your children. Those new personalities didn't erase who we were. They made us richer." A wave of relief washed over her. Perhaps she could shape her legacy in ways she hadn't envisioned before. As the conversation flowed, encouraging curiosity about new dishes and fruits that would accompany their beloved chili, Ruth noted a shift not just at the table, but within herself. Her voice grew steadier, her smile wider. The fear began to dissipate like mist in sunlight, revealing new possibilities. But as laughter erupted around the table, Ruth's thoughts took a sharper turn. Was she truly ready for this change? What if her greatest efforts to merge tradition and health became a source of contention? Later that evening, while tidying the kitchen, the familiar weight began to settle upon her shoulders once more. Could the rhythm of her familial heart really sustain the beat of her newfound ambitions? Just then, as she caught a glimpse of the empty chili bowl, a terrifying thought emerged. What if she was not the only one struggling with change? What if Joe, Linda, or even Emma had their own fears about diverging from the established patterns they had always known? She snagged her phone, heart pounding as she contemplated her next move. Would she dare to reach out, to address these apprehensions head-on? The prospect of confronting not only her own vulnerabilities, but also those of her family made her pause. The moment of truth dangled tantalizingly close, and with it the realization that she must confront not only her journey, but also the fears that might lay frozen in her family's hearts. Would they be brave enough to embrace these transformations together, or would the fear of change divide them? Ruth took a deep breath, feeling both exhilarated and terrified. It was time for her to uncover what lurked beneath the surface of family togetherness. The path to nourishment, both physical and emotional, beckoned. Ruth stood at the kitchen sink, letting warm water rinse away the residue of the chili bowl. Each droplet felt like a reminder of the emotional cleansing she sought, but doubt still swirled in her mind like the turbulent water down the drain. She couldn't ignore the creeping fear. What if her family resisted change more than they showed? The thought festered in her mind as she wiped the countertop clean, almost frantically. She replayed the evening's exchange, her family's laughter echoing in her ears, but she couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty that threatened to overshadow their enthusiasm. Determined to break through that cloud, Ruth decided to schedule a family meeting, a casual gathering meant to address the elephant in the room. It would be an opportunity to not only share her ideas about evolving their meals, but also to gauge everyone's feelings about the changes she was proposing. Could she really expect her family to share her newfound openness? As she stared out the window, watching the neighborhood children play, a new idea struck her. Perhaps she should engage them in the cooking process rather than simply presenting a finished dish. It might ease their anxieties and empower them to share their preferences. Cooking could be a communal act, a bonding experience that merged the past with the future instead of severing it. That Saturday night, she gathered them, all four, including Emma, the youngest, who still had that whimsical spark in her eyes. The living room filled with an energy that flared her hope. "Okay, everyone, let's brainstorm some dinner ideas," Ruth announced, setting out paper and colorful markers on the coffee table. The initial silence was heavy as they exchanged glances, unsure. At that moment, Ruth understood the burden of expectations she had unintentionally placed on herself. This wasn't the sole responsibility of her shoulders. Joe broke the tension, cautiously asking, "So, what are we considering? The new fruit suggestions, right?" Their discussion began simply. Ruth encouraged them to suggest favorite fruits. Linda chimed in excitedly about mangoes, while Emma's eyes lit up at the mention of strawberries. Each suggestion was a tentative step into unknown territory, reflecting their inclinations and fears simultaneously. Ruth felt a warm surge of pride as she watched their involvement, but beneath it simmered her uncertainty. Were they truly embracing this, or were they merely playing along with the idea? As they scrawled down ideas on the paper, some of their laughter felt genuine, yet Ruth grappled with her own insecurities. "Why fix what's not broken?" Joe stated at one point, frowning as if the notion of change felt alien to him. That comment stung. It echoed her own fears about the shifts and alterations she planned. Ruth inhaled deeply, challenging herself to listen rather than react. "What do you think would happen if we tried to change things a little? It doesn't mean we'll lose what we have, just that we can grow from it, just like our family has grown." Silence again settled as her words seeped into the air, hanging in the space between them. Would they see change as a threat or an opportunity? As the session progressed, Ruth felt lighter as ideas flourished. They engaged more than she had anticipated. Dishes began to take shape, intertwining both old favorites and new possibilities. She scribbled down 3 ideas on the notepad, each more colorful and plant-based than the last. Excitement buzzed in the air. Yet, as they wrapped up, Ruth's heart tightened with apprehension. This was only the beginning. They might agree in this moment, but how would they face changes when confronted with tradition again? The next day, as she prepared lunch, she found herself scanning through her notes, feeling tenuous about how to present these changes to the rest of the family. Confrontation loomed, a quiet storm ready to break. How could she fortify her hopes once again, only to face the very resistance she feared? Ruth set her phone down forcefully, a decision crystallizing in her mind. "I need to test the waters," she thought. Stepping outside her comfort zone had borne some fruit. She must continue the journey. She had to be ready to talk openly with her family about the underlying emotions they had yet to completely share. The challenge lay ahead. Was she prepared to face them one more time, to confront their deepest reservations and perhaps unveil vulnerabilities she hadn't accounted for? The stakes were growing higher, and Ruth felt the pull of transformation edging closer, waiting for a leap. As Ruth glanced at her reflection in the kitchen window, she saw a resolve forming within her that hadn't been there before. Today marked a distinction in her journey. She needed not only to voice her vision, but to embrace the discussions that might unfold, the skeptics and supporters alike. Armed with her notes and a determination that sharpened with each passing moment, she felt a wave of clarity. Facing her family was not only a personal challenge, but a professional one too. She blended her home life and a burgeoning passion for nutritional alternatives that could inspire change in their lives. Her mind raced as she outlined her approach, understanding that each family member had unique perspectives shaped by their experiences. This introspection ignited an innovative spark. What if their resistance stemmed from uncertainty, not an aversion to change? Minutes later, Ruth called them to the dining table, where an array of vibrant fruits and vegetables lay enticingly displayed. As they took seats, she felt the tension ripple through the air, not a tangible thing, but a weight that pressed against her chest. "I want to share something important today," Ruth began, her fingers nervously leafing through her colorful notes. "I believe we can start a journey together, one that embraces change in our meals, blending what we love with new ideas. We don't have to lose our favorites. We can incorporate new flavors and techniques." The room fell silent. Each family member exchanged glances, their apprehensions palpable. Joe's brow furrowed, and Linda stiffened in her chair, as if waiting for a critique instead of an opportunity. Emma, seemingly undeterred, tilted her head quizzically, as though she relished the idea of culinary adventures. Ruth pressed forward, her voice steadying. "Let's begin to experiment. I've created a list of ideas based on what you shared last night. This is a chance for us to create meals together, try new fruits like kiwi or pomegranate, while still making our beloved chili and pasta." She watched for their reactions, wishing to gauge their commitment beneath the hesitation. "Isn't the idea of change disturbing?" Joe said, crossing his arms. "Why should we change when we have good meals already?" Ruth recognized this moment as pivotal. It wasn't just about food, it was about confronting deep-seated fears of transformation. "I understand why you feel that way, but change doesn't have to be scary. It can be a new chapter in our family's culinary journey," she countered. "What if we approach this as a team, taste testing and experimenting together?" With each word, Ruth sensed a shift. She saw hesitation give way to curiosity in Emma's eyes, now reflecting interest rather than confusion. "Can we make our dessert a new fruit salad?" Emma suggested, her voice brightening the room. "Absolutely, and maybe we can all pick fruits to try, like a mixed fruit sorbet," Ruth replied, excitement surfacing through her initial trepidation. Engaging Emma, who represented hope and possibility, infused courage into her suggestions. Joe sighed, his expression nuanced, striving for patience. "All right, but how do we know it will taste any good?" Ruth paused, confronting her own reservations in tandem. "We won't always know, but that's the beauty of trying. Recipes can evolve just like we do. Every experiment teaches us something, and that journey could strengthen our family bond." Just as the tension began to shift towards intrigue, Linda spoke up, her voice revealing a deeper concern. "But what if we don't like it? What if it changes our family traditions for good? Do we risk losing what we cherish?" The questions momentarily scattered Ruth's confidence, but she steadied herself, understanding this conversation was rich with emotion. "I care about our traditions too, but isn't our family worth experimenting for? Aren't we strong enough to navigate these changes together?" Her words hung in the air, challenging them to confront the very essence of their unity in the face of transformation. As her family considered her proposal, the atmosphere thickened with an unvoiced agreement that they could either reject or welcome vulnerability in this journey. Ruth took a moment, contemplating how resilient they could be through this evolution she'd ignited. Yet underlying everything was her fear. What if they ultimately chose to resist her vision? Suddenly, she remembered a powerful resolve from her past. This clarity had come when she reconciled her professional ideals with personal realities. I cannot turn back now, she thought, reminding herself of how far she had come. In that moment, Ruth had a hidden resolve. This battle might not be just about food. It was about building her family's resilience against change. Perhaps Ruth had the ability to instill in them a sense of adventure with food, shaping who they were as a family and as individuals. But would they embrace this journey, or was it futile to move against their fears? The hesitations of the conversation hung in the air like a fragile promise, tempting her to push further into the unknown, where both joy and trepidation awaited. Ruth took a deep breath, ready to confront what lay ahead. The moment was upon them. She had to reveal one last idea to sway them into this new chapter, a bold step that led to the heart of the matter, a revelation she had yet to fully articulate. What if, to truly embrace this change, we start with a family cooking day? Everyone finishes their day by contributing to one meal together. We'll help each other discover new recipes that reflect our collective tastes. The groups shifted in their chairs, the idea resonating, potentially illuminating another step forward. But Ruth knew the real revelation was just beginning, waiting to emerge within the chaos of exploration and growth, just beyond the veil of their uncertainty. How far could they push each other if they dared to embrace vulnerability to its fullest? The tension was thickening, and as she glanced around the table, Ruth realized they would need every ounce of courage she could muster if they were to transform as she imagined. Ruth's heart raced as she absorbed the subtle ripples of uncertainty circling the table. The invitation to a family cooking day loomed ahead, promising adventure, yet shrouded in unspoken mishaps. She pushed through the weight of her own anxiety, aware that authentic change required more than just her enthusiasm. It demanded the collective engagement of her family. "Let's think of this cooking day like an experiment," she proposed, knowing experimenting was often fraught with unexpected outcomes. Like when we're trying a new recipe, we can create a casual atmosphere. If something doesn't work, we'll just laugh about it, together. We can focus on fun rather than perfection. Joe raised an eyebrow, still skeptical. "And if we end up cooking something awful?" Ruth smiled, recognizing this as a moment to redirect fear into humor. "Then we can create the infamous family flop cookbook. Picture it, us years later, reminiscing over our culinary disasters. It'll make great stories." The idea hung in the air, and Ruth could see the slight upturn of Joe's mouth. Emboldened, she moved deeper into the conversation. "Think about our favorites," she continued. "We can build on those, keep what we love, but add little twists, like chili, maybe a splash of mango at Chipotle. You never know. Today's surprise could become tomorrow's staple." Linda's forehead crinkled as she considered. "How do you know we'll want to do this every week? What if one day we just want pizza?" "Perfect! Let's make homemade pizzas," Ruth offered quickly, her excitement spilling over. "We can each pick toppings, experiment with different cheeses. The focus should be on collaboration." "Pizza sounds good," Emma chimed in, her eyes wide with the thrill of possibility. It was a small breakthrough, enough to reinforce Ruth's conviction. Enthusiasm was infectious. Joe sighed again, but without the burden of earlier skepticism. "All right, let's say we go ahead with this idea of yours. Who will clean up the mess?" "Team effort," Ruth said brightly, the atmosphere lightening. "The mess is part of the experience, right? We'll tackle it together, just like the meals." A chorus of reluctant agreement ignited her courage further. Ruth felt a flicker of hope. Their willingness to entertain her suggestions marked small victories. Each shift in the conversation was a step closer toward the family unit she envisioned, contributing to a new legacy. But just as a ripple of excitement surged, the shadows of doubt reappeared in Linda's gaze. I worry, Ruth. What if we can't maintain this? What if next week no one cares about cooking together anymore? Inwardly, Ruth grappled with her own uncertainties. Her pulse quickened, recognizing the stakes of this endeavor. This wasn't about just food. It was about fostering a deeper connection that could weather the storms of change. I get that fear, Linda. What we're trying is foreign territory. But that's also where we can grow together, Ruth said, her energy infusing the room. If we allow ourselves to get comfortable with uncertainty, we might find joy in the process. This isn't just about meals. It's about building memories and facing challenges as a family. Ruth observed their expressions, seeing the glimmers of processing. Conversations did weave them tighter, creating a fabric of shared hopes and dreams. Then a thought struck her. How about we document this? We could create a family food journal, notes on what worked, what we'd never try again, and photos of our best dishes, like our own family cookbook in the making. Emma perked up once more, her creativity shining through. We can even have a Dish of the Week plaque. The winner decides the next week's recipe. Joe grinned, caught by the concept of friendly competition enhancing their bond. I'm in for that. As the ideas tumbled forth, Ruth felt the swirling anticipation morph into solid footing beneath her. They weren't entirely on board yet, but she saw that possibility flickering in their responses. Then a moment of vulnerability struck. Would they embrace a cooking revolution under her helm, binding them into a dynamic force of familial resilience? Or would this excursion become mere a footnote in the story of their family? Just think, what if in a year we're serving a dish to our friends that we created together? That would be something, she murmured, hesitation creeping back into her tone. As her family nodded thoughtfully, an electric charge filled the air. Their curiosity was stirred, but the specter of risk loomed. She realized then that this was just the beginning. They stood on the precipice of their new journey intertwined with the unknown. Ruth couldn't shake the thrill of excitement mixed with nervous energy. Cooking together could flourish, offering insights into each family member's hidden talents. But would this initial enthusiasm withstand the inevitable hurdles they would face? The conversation continued, but tension simmered beneath the surface. Ruth sensed change was near, teetering, ready to tip either way. The foundations they might build together would require strength and conviction, qualities they needed to dig deep to discover. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Ruth's mind raced with more questions than answers. Would this experiment lead to nourishment of both body and spirit, or would they end up returning to their routine, content but stagnant? All she knew was she needed to prepare herself for the challenges lurking ahead, for the moment that would demand her resolve as they embarked down this untrodden path of culinary exploration. The planning stage for the family cooking day felt like a whirlwind of excitement. Ruth's mind buzzed with ideas, flowing like the ingredients she hoped to mix in a bowl soon. She pulled out a notepad and began jotting down the planned meals, remembering the exhilaration in her family's voices as they threw out suggestions. Yet, buried in that enthusiasm was an undercurrent of doubt that weighed heavily on her. The next morning found Ruth staring at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, a stark reminder of the challenges she faced beyond family dynamics, her own deep-rooted feelings about inadequacy. Would she be able to lead them, manage their expectations, and maintain the momentum they built? Each stroke of her toothbrush became a form of self-coaching, a reminder that she was embarking on a journey of growth, not just for herself, but for everyone gathered around that kitchen table. Later that day, Ruth decided to rearrange her workspace to foster a sense of creativity. She cleared off clutter, creating an inviting atmosphere reminiscent of fresh ingredients at a market. Perhaps embracing a more artistic approach could resolve her underlying fears of failure. She envisioned vibrant colors and smells wafting through the air, igniting passion within her kitchen's family. As thoughts swirled in her mind, she could almost hear her family's laughter blending melodiously with the kitchen's clinks and clatters. but as she arranged her notes and recipe cards, a familiar voice echoed in her head, whispering warnings of potential mishaps. Relaxing into the vision of what was possible, she struggled to pacify her inner critic, the part of her afraid of not measuring up to expectations, both her own and her family's. The family gathered for dinner that evening, and with nervous energy, Ruth ventured beyond small talk to revisit their cooking idea. "So, what do we think? Have we still got our game faces on?" Emma's eyes gleamed. "I still think the pizza idea is solid. I can't wait to see how many weird toppings we can come up with." Joe chuckled, rolling his eyes. "As long as there's no pineapple involved, I'm fine." The laughter around the table came naturally, yet Ruth's mind raced. She realized that the very atmosphere she wished to create began here, sharing moments, eliciting reactions, stirring smiles. Leaning into that familiar act of cooking could serve as an anchor, grounding them amidst inevitable challenges. Deciding to address her doubts head-on, Ruth conceded, "I'd love to hear if anyone had any reservations. I know I do." She could sense the hesitation in the air, a pause that made her heart race and resolve harden. "What if we get frustrated?" Linda offered, her tone cautious but genuine. "What if we mess up?" Ruth countered, feeling a wave of adrenaline. "I think that actually adds to the experience. What's life without a little bit of chaos?" That provoked a contemplative silence, and for a split second, Ruth felt vulnerable, the weight of responsibility settling back on her shoulders. She was offering them a blueprint for not just cooking, but for embracing imperfections. Would her family truly participate with the same zest? A fleeting sense of empowerment came over her as she considered how this cooking endeavor reflected their journey as a family. "Let's make a pact, then. For better or worse, we stick together as a unit. If nothing else, we'll have our family flop cookbook in progress," she said, half joking. But she sensed an unspoken agreement forming. With every stumble she feared, another way to connect with her family emerged. Ruth saw the potential bond growing, recognizing that the real strength lay not just in the meals they would create, but in their collective resolve to embrace change and challenge themselves. As the evening unfolded, Ruth chatted and listened, her anxiety slowly transforming into defiance against doubts. She resolved internally to enhance her role, not just guiding them through cooking, but joyfully nurturing the family unity she yearned for. Yet, as the dishes were cleared and the remnants of conversation lingered in the air, a shadow of larger questions loomed. Was she genuinely prepared for the trials awaiting them? Would she maintain her confidence amidst the many disasters and the adversarial forces that life might dish out? Ruth picked up her notepad again, weighing the decisions ahead. It was increasingly clear that she was on the brink of significant personal transformation, but a challenge loomed. Would she rise to meet the unfolding journey? With uncertainty sparking in her chest, Ruth set her pen down, knowing tomorrow would be pivotal. The family's cooking day would not just test their culinary skills, it would demand the woman she wished to be, the determined matriarch daring to lead them into a realm of possibility. As the night surrendered to shadows, the singular thought anchored in her mind. The moment of revelation was near, and she could no longer ignore the deeper implications of their shared journey. The dawn of the cooking day emerged with a crispness that settled into Ruth's bones, mingling with her anticipation and anxiety in equal measure. She stirred awake and lay still, allowing the hum of her thoughts to swirl around her. Today was not merely about creating dishes, it was about forging deeper connections and discovering something new about herself as a leader, mother, and cook. The aroma of coffee brewed in the kitchen like a siren's call. She levered herself up, a wave of determination washing over her as she prepared to confront the day ahead. The meticulous planning she had engaged in felt essential, yet it was equally clear no amount of preparation could ward off unexpected moments, both glorious and disastrous. As the family convened, she found herself slipping into organization mode, her nervous energy translated into a composed exterior. "Okay, everyone? "Let's run through what we'll be cooking today," she declared, sensing the pulse of enthusiasm radiating from each family member. Emma was quick to dive in, her portfolio of pizza toppings laid out across the table like vibrant colors on a painter's palette. "How about mushrooms, olives, and jalapenos to kick it up a notch?" Joe raised an eyebrow, torn between adventurous spirit and tradition. "Not bad, but how about a classic pepperoni, just to balance things out?" Ruth listened, savoring their banter. Each suggestion highlighted their personalities, revealing layers she wanted to nurture. With each back and forth, her heart raced, not out of fear, but from a burgeoning sense of pride. They were engaging in a dance together, a taco twist here, a pizza push there. "Anyone thinking about how we can incorporate that flop concept?" Ruth reminded them lightly, a happy reminder of their earlier agreement. "Failure today is an opportunity, remember?" However, behind her resolve, doubt still lurked. The prospect of chaos loomed larger than her desire for success. What if she couldn't manage the chaos? Would a misplaced ingredient or overcooked dough send her family spiraling into frustration? The nagging worry tried to creep back in, but she refused to entertain it. As utensils clattered and flour dust floated, Ruth observed her loved ones in their elements. Emma narrowly avoiding mess as she chopped vegetables, Emma and Joe engaged in a lively debate over toppings. This was where growth seeds were sown, she realized, not in pristine perfection, but in the messy, unrefined moments where conversations unfolded like the dough they needed. Yet moments of doubt resurfaced, intensifying into flashes of nostalgia. She remembered the last time they tried cooking together. It had ended in tears and frustration, a stark contrast to the salubrious outcome she hoped for today. With that memory serving as a distraction, she focused on grounding her thoughts. "All right, team, let's split into groups. I'll take the dough, and you guys tackle the toppings," Ruth commanded, her voice steadier than she felt inside. She noticed how easily they obeyed and rallied around her. As she began kneading the pizza dough, a quiet rhythm developed, grounding her in the present. Each push, fold, and stretch of the dough echoed her burgeoning determination. She was turning away from thoughts of inadequacy and leaning into the strength she had practiced during moments of quiet self-reflection. And just like the dough transforming in her hands, she felt her own resolve rebaking into something greater. But then came that first challenge. One of the ingredients was missing. "Where's the yeast?" she asked, her voice taut. The sudden absence felt magnified in the moment, the weight of scrutiny shifting toward her. As silence ensued, she could feel the tension rise, her pulse quickening. Would she falter, or could this moment become a new testament to resilience for them? In a heartbeat, she had a choice to make, a defining moment looming. "Okay, let's think outside the box. Who's up for a yeast-free pizza experiment?" she suggested, forcing confidence into her voice despite the tremors of doubt. Reluctant laughter broke the tension, and she sensed a shift, a joint decision to embrace unpredictability, reflecting the very spirit she hoped to cultivate. Perhaps it was in these unscripted moments where real learning transpired, not just culinary prowess, but about accepting imperfection within and around them. With sharpened focus, Ruth felt the undercurrent of each decision ripple through her circle. What began as mere cooking morphed into a tapestry of shared experiences, where triumphs were met with laughter and setbacks became teaching moments wrapped in hugs. But as the crusts began to bake and the sense of melting cheese mingled in the air, a deeper question began to forge a path in her mind. Was this newfound bond enough to withstand the storms ahead? The cooking day had become a vessel, transporting her toward a version of herself that was more resilient, yet the fear of her inadequacies creeping back lingered in the shadows. With an unknown terrain stretching ahead, Ruth inhaled deeply, savoring the bittersweet taste of vulnerability mixed with hope. She was on the cusp of uncovering whether she could truly lead them through any trial, culinary or otherwise. and with each moment passing, the question crystallized more acutely. When faced with uncertainty, what needed to shift within her to emerge triumphant? The faint jingle of the oven timer pulled Ruth from her introspection, snapping her back to the present. The aroma of the nearly baked pizzas began weaving through the kitchen, a reminder of the work they had put in together. A cascade of pride washed over her as she watched her family bustling about, laughing and tasting bits of toppings, the earlier tension dissipating into camaraderie. It was a small victory in a sea of uncertainty. As she pulled the first pizza from the oven, the golden crust glistened, a visual testament to their collective effort. Joe and Emma erupted in cheers, and for a fleeting moment she felt invincible, fortified by their joy. But even as the euphoria surged, doubt lingered. Would this be the last blissful memory before chaos resumed, or could it be a stepping stone to something enduring? Cutting into the pizza, she took a moment to savor the moment. The cheese stretched as she lifted a slice, and laughter erupted once more. It was in exchanges like these that Ruth found clarity. The power of familial connection took precedence over any culinary mishap. It felt transformative, a push against the constrictive walls of her self-imposed limitations. Yet even amidst the flavor and laughter, threads of anxiety tightened within her. She was the orchestrator today, but what awaited them beneath the sheen of happiness? Somehow, she knew that today was just a warm-up, a rehearsal for the complexity looming ahead, especially as life outside their kitchen seemed to claw at the edges of their sanctuary. After a few slices, conversation flickered into deeper territory. Linda, with her perceptive gaze, caught Ruth's distracted eyes. "You okay? You've been a bit quiet since the pizza came out," she said, her voice steady yet tinged with concern. Ruth paused, contemplating how to articulate the undercurrents swirling within her. "I guess I'm just reflecting on how easily the chaos can return and wondering if we can sustain this feeling," she admitted. "Does it all fall apart after today?" Linda nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Maybe it's not about the perfection of each moment. It's how we navigate the chaos when it returns. That's where growth lies, don't you think?" This struck Ruth like a spark, igniting kindling. Her mind raced at the implications. What if the true challenge was less about control and more about adaptation? What if she could embrace uncertainty as a vital ingredient rather than an intruder? Thoughts began to swirl around her, highlighting opportunities disguised as obstacles. As they moved to make a dessert for their impromptu feast, she attempted to shift gears. "Okay, how about we attempt our own version of a fruit tart?" Ruth proposed, steering the focus towards collaboration and experimentation. Embracing the unexpected turn, she felt more alive than ever before. Each decision, from selecting the fruits to crafting the pastry base, became a new expression of vulnerability and creativity. As flowers scattered and fruits were piled high, the dreamlike atmosphere of the kitchen deepening, Ruth felt buoyed by newfound resolve. Yet, beneath the sparkle of their fun, shadows whispered at the edges. If today had carved out a small pocket of hope and connection, what of tomorrow? Was the real test rooted in this moment's embrace of failure and joy, or was it about weathering the inevitable storms that would arrive uninvited, shaking the foundations they had begun to build? With vibrant fruits spilling across the countertop, she inhaled sharply, energy surging in her veins. Growth was a process, a craft requiring unyielding patience, and she had taken the first steps. However, the weight of responsibility bore down even more heavily. Each day was a tightrope walk, balancing fleeting triumphs with impending trials. And sprawled before her now lay not just a dessert recipe, but a reflection of her dreams, hopes, and fears. As their laughter filled the kitchen again, Ruth wiped her hands on a towel, preparing to embrace whatever came next. But also emerging was another unsettling realization. Her desire for change fueled a deeper question. Could her willingness to face imperfections build a foundation that would allow her to lead her family through the inevitable storms that lie ahead? Ruth glanced at the unfinished tart on the counter, knowing that the real test hadn't truly begun yet. The time had come to confront the deeper vulnerabilities lying beneath the surface, where real transformation awaited. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow through the kitchen, Ruth felt a sense of completion wash over her. The fruit tart had turned out beautifully, a patchwork of vibrant colors and enticing aromas filling the air. Axel, one of her grandchildren, took the first bite, his eyes widening with delight. "It's delicious, Grandma. You should make this every week," he exclaimed, his enthusiasm illuminating the room. Laughter surrounded her, echoing off the walls and wrapping around her heart like an embrace. But in that fleeting moment of joy, a flood of thoughts raced through her mind. Was this achievement merely a temporary victory? Would the euphoria of today persist through the inevitable challenges of tomorrow? However, just as doubt threatened to pierce her jubilant bubble, she was struck by a realization. Today wasn't just about crafting a meal, it was about forging connections that transcended culinary skills. Each time her family rallied around the kitchen, overcoming small obstacles together, they were building resilience, a trait that could serve them in all facets of life. They were evolving, exchanging lessons wrapped in laughter, and that held more value than any recipe. "Next week, we'll try something different," Ruth suggested, excitement bubbling in her voice. "How about we explore some new grains and make a salad with quinoa and roasted veggies? We can make it into a competition, seeing who can create the best toppings." Joe, usually her anchor of tradition, nodded in agreement, but with a twinkle in his eye that hinted at acceptance of change. "All right, but you're on with that competition. Just remember, my dish will be the crowd favorite," he teased, laughter bouncing back and forth like a game of catch. The momentum carried forward as they began to clean up the kitchen, the camaraderie palpable. A shared memory was being formed, one that involved not just the meals, but also the spirit of connection and trust that they could build together. This was no longer just about food. This journey was igniting a transformation in each of them. Ruth had faced her fears of inadequacy head-on today. She had consciously prioritized fostering a nurturing environment where everyone could feel less pressure to conform and more empowered to create. Each success, mishap, and playful comment from her family had woven a thread of togetherness that sang of resilience and warmth. She glanced around the kitchen, feeling immense pride. The laughter that erupted from her family was a melody of shared experiences, and this moment crystallized the understanding that these endeavors mattered more than maintaining the simple comforts of the past. The culinary shifts were simply manifestations of a larger theme. They were forging a new heritage that embraced adaptability and growth. Yet beneath her exhilaration, a familiar hint of anxiety flickered within her. Would today's accomplishments be enough to weather the storms of the everyday realities of life? As she washed the dishes, she allowed herself to reflect on her journey. Ruth had transformed from fearing change to feeling empowered by it. Cooking had become an act of bravery, a willingness to trust in her family's responses and in her own growth as a matriarch. The doubts that had once consumed her found a quieter space in the background, overshadowed by the undeniable fulfillment she found in shared experiences. Suddenly, Ruth felt a wave of confidence wash over her. Change could be constantly evolving, not something to be feared. It was about nurturing their bond through culinary adventures and rich conversations where each individual could contribute. Today she had affirmed her commitment, not just to nutritious meals, but to a legacy of resilience and adaptability, molding a family that embraced imperfections joyfully. Sinking deeper into the sense of fulfillment, Ruth imagined the future years flowing onward. She envisioned her family gathered around the table, joyful stories being shared over freshly made meals that echoed both delightful traditions and new explorations. As her grandchildren grew, she hoped they would carry this understanding of adaptability into their lives, viewing challenges as opportunities to innovate rather than obstacles to retreat from. Finishing the final dish, she put it aside and turned around, looking into the glowing faces of her family. Each smile reflected a fragment of harmony, not just united in love, but united amid change. "You all knocked it out of the park today," she declared, her tone infused with gratitude. It wasn't simply about the food, but about love, laughter, and the willingness to adapt together. They had not just made a meal, they had created a guiding principle for their future. With renewed determination, Ruth knew she was more than ready. She had become a leader willing to navigate uncharted territories with her family, a beacon lighting the path of growth through each carefully crafted meal. It was not merely about what they served, but about who they became together. And as the evening melted into night, Ruth understood. It was not just the chili, the tart, or the future plated meals that mattered, but the unwavering spirit of love and resilience they cultivated together. This realization marked a significant step in her personal evolution, and in that moment she found the peace she had long sought, a heart full of promise and a home rich with hope. As they began to disperse, laughter still trailing behind, Ruth made a mental note. This journey was just beginning. Tomorrow would carry its own adventure, a continued endeavor, and she would embrace it with open arms. The kitchen was no longer a battleground for traditions, but a canvas for vibrant possibilities. Do not hesitate. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment below your reactions and theories about Ruth's journey and what's next. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Remember, true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions. Don't wait even one more second to share.